Good afternoon, colleagues, and thanks for joining. And our apologies for the delay that we have experienced. There's been some technical glitches. We have reached our subscription number of 100, and therefore we request other colleagues to watch it on Facebook of the department and on my Facebook page of Sediko Rakolote. You'll be able to post questions there, and the speakers will be able to respond. We'll bring in the questions here for the speakers to respond. Once more, thanks, colleagues, for joining. We really appreciate your participation in this webinar. Our focus today, it will be about the market access in agricultural sector, particularly also on agri-processing. The challenge of market access has been with us for a long time. Most of the farmers or those who want to go into farming, every time they complain about market access. Without a waste of time, I will call on our first speaker, Pindile, to give us a presentation, and after a presentation, we can take some questions here and there and allow the preparation for the next speaker to come in and give us the next presentation. Over to you, Pindile.
Good morning, host, and thank you very much for the opportunity. As indicated on the slide, my topic will be referring to the status of international trade and international agreements in relation to South Africa. Good morning to all participants. My presentation will be then operated from the host side due to IT challenges. So I will be giving a guidance as to when to move. I think we can start with the first slide, which gives us an outline of what is covered in the overall presentation. I can see there is no movement on the slide, host.
Please check again. I think there's a movement. We are on the introduction part.
And on my side, I remained with the cover page. I will proceed also then using what I have. In terms of introduction, I thought I need to bring it up on 4 that international trade is regulated under the World Trade Organization, of which South Africa is at least one of the founding members of the World Trade Organization, as it took effect in 1995. In terms of agriculture, then, we know that we do have 2 key agreements that are guiding our operations and our state of play. We do have the Agreement on Agriculture, and we also do have the SPS agreement. So those are the key that are guiding our multilateral engagements in relation to agriculture, and also as we are focusing on the reform of the agriculture. So that's now that is a guide for us to ensure that we operate fairly and we are transparent and we ensure that there is no unjustified reasoning in terms of restrictions to market access. So I also want to indicate that the international trade plays a crucial role into bringing the food around the world and also contributing into the food security in the globe. We do respond to people's needs, and we do know the challenges in relation to climate variation. And when we are in season in certain commodities, the other countries are out of season, and therefore international trade opens that opportunity so that we ensure food security throughout the globe. I also want to talk into the market dynamics that we are observing as we are trading. We talk to the prospects of barriers and protectionism by various countries, and therefore we need to take and put systems in place to ensure that our commodities are able to penetrate, though the environment is not easy to get to. We have observed a number of trade wars during our era, And that changes the global trade flows, as we have observed the limitations in some of the products from one country to other countries. We see the disease outbreaks, among the others, including climate change, that continue to be a threat in terms of increased production and also increased trade. So if you do have a protocol with a certain country, and you happen to have a disease outbreak, and that protocol cannot then proceed allowing the product into that specific country. We also see the price volatility and changing consumer preferences. Then that also pushes up into diversification of our products to ensure that we do really respond to our to the consumer needs at any time as they continue to change. We see the price transactions that are changing, and also policy applications by various countries that tend to impose limitations in terms of access into the countries. Then I get to the next slide, which talks to South Africa's preferential and potential markets. If you look into that map, there's a highlight in terms of the colors that are used. The green area indicates our future growth potential, and the red ones, they indicate the competitors in terms of South African fresh produce. So we are all targeting the same markets, and therefore our innovation need to be strengthened to ensure that we're able to beat these competitors, especially in the target markets. We also look into the circled regions. We are also operating in terms of the agreed trade agreements. So those marked areas indicate our preferential market based on the trade agreements that we already have negotiated, and some of them are being negotiated as we speak, and we are reviewing some to ensure that we meet and satisfy all the members of the member countries into such an agreement. So I will also explain in detail those agreements as highlighted with those circles as we get into the next slide. As indicated, then, if we are concentrating in Africa, moving from that bigger circle that highlighted the agreements that we have, where we need to note that as South Africa, we operate in the group of SACU. We are part of the SACU agreement and the SACU members, as the agreement took effect after amendment in 2002. We also have the SADC-EFTA, which was also, I will not explain, read the number of years because you can see in the presentation. So you can see why now the bigger area in Africa that was highlighted, it indicates the potential that we already have. If you look at the last agreement, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, which took effect last year, and also expectation that we were going to start trading under it from 1st of July 2020. We unfortunately could not proceed with the trading due to pandemic that had affected and delays in terms of negotiations and resolving the ending issues. So Africa remains our biggest market, and we concentrate in it, and we would like to diversify. And it brings now a more opportunity for other parties that could not reach out into other markets, that they can also tap into this opportunity that is brought about by Africa Free Trade Continental Area. In Europe, we also have SADC EU EPA. We also have SACU-EFTA FTA that now give an expanded a network where we can export our commodities and products. In America, we already know that under that unilateral agreement, AGOA, we are able to also to export that as South Africa and other members of the African continent. We also note the SACU-Mercosur, and I will proceed indicate that in the Asian area, we do not have any preferential trade agreement. However, we are able to proceed exporting our commodities into that region, and you will recall that it has a majority of it highlighted in the map as our growth area and expansion area. And you see the last one indicates to multilateral. South Africa supports multilateralism and has indicated that we formed part of the founding members of the WTO, and we are also a member of the World Wide Trade Group. We also have trade agreements that are being negotiated. Some of them are reviewed based on the level of satisfaction by the member countries, wherein they highlight which areas that needs to be reviewed. So we do have now, we're looking forward actually to the implementation of SACU Mozambique UK EPA, as we are aware that UK has exited EU, and effect from 1st of January 2021, we will be able to trade under that agreement. We have successfully negotiated and secured what was preferential and preferred from the EU package. So we have moved with some of the preferred aspects into the UK EPA agreement. COMESA tripartite, South Africa, there's an indication that we have both signed and we have ratified. And in terms of AfCFTA, the same has happened. South Africa has signed and ratified, and we are part of the continuation of the negotiation. And the roadmap is tabled now, or will be tabled by ministers of trade in their meeting today, is that countries are given an opportunity to conclude on all the outstanding issues so that the agreement can, the countries can start trading from 1st of January 2021. And then we do have the other two. One, there's an indication that it is still under review. We are still trading in it. However, we do review the aspects that we have identified that they need to be improved. SACU India preferential trade agreement, there have been slow growth in it. We move on to the next slide that indicates our performance in terms of trade as South Africa and trading to the regions that were highlighted. Indicated in the previous slide that Asia is our growth area. You may see that our growth comparing from 2018 to 2019 have been the lowest in the current slide. However, with the projections, it has been identified as our growth. And a number of value chain roundtables actually have confirmed and identified the commodities. They already even have priority lists that have to be shared with the department to inform the negotiation agenda as to which commodity needs to get into which countries. Our growth, as we can see, it lowered in some of the countries. I don't want to mention all of them. As you can see, the EU, we have a reduction or a decline, and as well as Mercosur and Australia. In the previous slide also, I made reference that Australia is one of the strongest competitor, as well as the countries within the Mercosur region. Some of them are our strongest competitors, and then that informs why then we see that decline among the other reasons that may influence the decline in that. We move to the next slide, which summarizes what we have in this beautiful map. It is now an indication through the table. In that table, I would just go to the white area, which is not highlighted in yellow, to indicate that this is the area where we do not have a trade agreement. In terms of the yellow areas, we do have those as indicated. And what is you can read from this is that our biggest market in terms of share, it is Africa and the EU. So those are the biggest markets to date. And we trust that we will continue to expand in both markets, especially that we also have now the UK as a separate market from the EU, and also with the inception of AfCFTA. Next slide, please. Indicated in this slide is just to show the audience the top 10 products that we are, the top 10 markets that we are targeting for a number of commodities as indicated there. In the next slide, I will be indicating the commodities on their HS code. We can see Africa remains in top and EU remains in top. This is just a translation. It adds on the previous slides as well. And we have now some of the countries in the region of the Middle East that also come in. Thank you. Next slide, please. Summary have been indicated here. We would like to indicate to you the major agricultural export products without now looking at the market, but we already have indicated the market on the far right. But if you concentrate on the column that indicate main products grouping, this is what brings the highest value of to our economy in South Africa. I'm not going to list them. We can all see them. Both slides, they are talking to that. Thank you. Next one, please. And if I am to conclude, the chairperson, I just would like to indicate that in this value chain, this is an indication of the complexity of how South Africa and many other countries are able to, that have to go through into delivering the products to the consumer. We may see it as simple and easy in South Africa that we are able to produce a majority of what we want and to get, however, some of the countries are unable to produce, and therefore we have to undergo through this value chain to ensure that we comply and meet the standards as dictated by the target market. So this is my concluding slide, Chairperson, and we want to appreciate our producers, our industry that are able to contribute to the state of resilience of our agriculture to ensure that we are able to feed the world as it is indicated here. I thank you, and thank you to the listeners and everybody. Thank you, Chairperson. That was my concluding slide.
Thank you so much, Indile. We really appreciate. Colleagues, we apologize. In the new norm, using technology, sometimes there are challenges. While you press forward, sometimes you press backward, and we are learning. We are learning as we go. I just want to check if the next presenter, who was supposed to be the first, Atlas, is around. I know that he was admitted now. Please, Atlas, if you are ready, indicate and open up your video so that we can allow you to present. Atlas, please, if you are ready, open up your video so that we can go to you, Atlas, if you're around. But in the meantime, those who want this presentation from Pindiwe, please write your email addresses on the chat box. I will ensure that you all receive this presentation. I'll email it to you. Those who want this presentation, please write your email addresses in the chat box. I'll ensure that you will get the presentation. What can happen now will take 5 hands. Just question to Pindile while we are preparing to welcome Atlas. 5 questions, 5 inputs or comments to Pindile. Then Pindile will be given a chance to respond. Then we can go on. Let's all those who want to ask questions and make inputs, raise up your hands. I'll take randomly. Obviously, in a group of over 100 people, not everyone will be able to speak. We should understand that. Those who want to ask questions, please raise up your hand. I see first we'll go to Lehlogonolo. When you ask your question, please open your video if possible. And then we'll go to Stefani. For now, I'll go to Lehlogonolo. Stefani. Stefani, you are on the floor. We'll go back to Lehlogonolo. Stefani.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies just if there's some background noise, there's some construction going on. I just have a question about the UK, SACU and Mozambique agreement. There was some concern that there's still some ratification outstanding. So I would just appreciate some clarity on the status of that agreement. Have all parties ratified, and will it be able to go into force in January next year? Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Stefani. Please mute your mic. We'll try to bring in Lethogonolo. We've been struggling to bring in Lethogonolo. In the meantime, we'll try to get Lebogang.
Thank you so much, Chair. My question to Pindile is, I hear her speaking a lot in terms of markets that they're trying to expand into. I'd like to get a bit more detail as to exactly how they would, or how they envisage doing that. That's the first question. And my second question is, I see everywhere there's a reference to prepared vegetables as opposed to the fruits. You're just pointing out fruits. What exactly do you mean by prepared vegetables and not just vegetables? Thank you.
Thank you, Lebogang. Can we go to Bandile? 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 Okay. Because Bandile cannot come in, please, Pindiwe, can you respond to the questions that were raised?
Sir?
Sorry, Pindiwe. Bandile is not. Sorry, Pindiwe, your mic is on mute. Let's take in Bandile first, then you'll respond. Bandile.
Okay, Chair. I just want to check the pineapple in market. What's the percentage of the South African pineapple market compared to the other countries? Thank you.
Thank you, Bandile. You can come in now, Pindiwe.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the UK agreement, yes, indeed. Not all countries have ratified. However, they've been given an opportunity to ratify until end of November. As we understand is that the agreement, everybody have agreed to it. It's only internal processes in individual countries to conclude their ratification as already agreed to. In terms of trade, yes, that decision has been taken. That effect from 1st of January 2021, we will be able to trade under that agreement. Regarding the expansion market, I know that, I'm not sure if the DDG is already in, because the response is linked to the SPS. What we do in the country together with the stakeholders, the industry group, we identify and prioritize the markets for individual commodities. And also internally within the department, they also prioritize depending on the capacity on addressing the requirements. Remember, the requirements of countries are not the same. They differ, and some are more stringent than the others. And we also continue to reprioritize according to that. So those fresh produce, all of them are subjected to a SPS requirement. And the processed products, they are not necessarily subjected to that. And a majority of them are easy to access market compared to fresh produce. And that is linked to biosecurity issues. Thank you. The last question was from Bandile. I would request Chair to please repeat that for me.
The question was around the issue of the pineapple market. Where are the pineapple market around the world, if I'm not wrong? And then we can, if it's not clear, we can take back Bandile to ask the question again. Bandile, do you want to come again to clarify the question?
Please.
Chair.
Yes.
I just want to know the percentage when you compare the South African pineapple market compared to the other countries, the share,
okay,
the percentage share.
The percentage share of the pineapple market of South Africa compared to other markets. That's the question.
Yeah, other countries, yes.
Yes. Thank you so much, Bandile. Thank you so much. I'm sure Pindile said your question now. Pindiwe?
Thank you, Bandile. Your question is so clear. And now we did not zoom into specific commodities. Otherwise, we would have taken the whole day. We take note of your question. You can forward us your email address, and then we will be able to forward that packaged information for you. Thank you so much.
Okay, let's take other sets of questions. Let's take other sets of questions for Pindiwe. Then we can go to Atlas Mosese. Let's take other questions for Pindiwe. If there are any questions, let's take questions for Pindiwe. Lehlogonolo, and then followed by Morena Kasha. Lehlogonolo, you can go. Morena Kasha.
Hi, Pindiwe.
Yes, sir, you can go on.
Yes. I'm a tilapia fish farmer, and we are strongly affected by the cheap imports, mainly from China and Indonesia. I'd like to find out from Pindiwe, how can we be protected from that, from cheap imports? Thank you.
Thank you. How can they be protected from cheap imports? Let's go to Yamkela. Yamkela.
Hello, Pindiwe, how are you? My question is based on the fact that I'm looking at the white areas where you've got trade agreements. And my question on those ones is that, are we going to explore those countries, as I believe that they are more congested and they will use much more of our products? That's my first question. And then I would like also for you to send us the presentation. We've been sending our emails. Can we send the presentation, please?
The person who will be responsible to send the presentation is me. I've requested all those who want to receive the presentation to submit their email addresses. And I can assure you that those who have submitted, they will definitely get their presentation before the end of business today. Pindiwe, you can answer.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the import control and tariff clarification, that is the responsibility of government under the entity or organization ITEC. So we can, in the department, link you up with a relevant management team that is controlling the importation of fish. Regarding the second question on the areas that we do not have trade agreements, you would have seen there, maybe I missed to explain the BRICS that is highlighted there. The BRICS formation is not the trade agreement, but is the cooperation arrangement. We know that South Africa is part of BRICS. So that was also, we had an indication to show that that relationship and cooperation that is indeed beneficial to us, and we're able to tap into those markets. And also, as indicated, that on the very first slide, that that is part of the region that has our growth potential, and as various roundtable groups that has been identified, and we are now concentrating our efforts towards opening those markets. Remember, they are not only for plant products, they are also for animal products. So we reprioritize and we listen to various roundtable groups and sit and together have a national priority list. I hope I've explained satisfactorily that question. Thank you.
Thank you, Pindiwe. Let's take another round of questions or inputs or comments on Pindiwe's presentation before we formally close and take that Atlas Mosese. Can we take other hands? I don't know if Lehlogonolo Sent has been up, and when I'm calling him, he's not asking a question. Lehlogonolo, Matele, your hand is up. Lehlogonolo Matele. Okay, Lehlogonolo's hand has been up, and even if I put it down, he raises it up. Anyone who wants to ask a question to Pindiwe? Okay, in the absence of any questions, what we'll definitely do is that we'll share the presentation to Pindiwe. And even though I've not yet discussed with the department, we have discovered today that there is much interest on the topic of market access. We need to have a follow-up session that can allow more participants, not only 100. We will increase our capacity, at least to allow more than 500 people to participate in that webinar. We'll definitely for sure make that arrangement, and we'll be having that follow-up session very soon. I will have a discussion with the department, colleagues with the department, to say, let's have a follow-up session very soon to ensure that at least we've got about 500 maximum participation. People want to know about the market access. They are plowing, they are doing all these things, they are doing the farming, but the challenge remains the market. And they are looking forward to get advices from government to say, where can they tap into in terms of the market? Thank you so much, Pindiwe, for your presentation. We really appreciate having you here. We are so humbled that you have taken your time and come and present to us. Thank you so much, Pindiwe. Without a waste of time, I'll request Douglas Mosese to make presentation to us. And if he has a slide to present also, I'll request him to forward it to me so that I can forward that presentation to participants. Over to you, Mr. Douglas Mosese.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good morning to all participants in this webinar. Maybe firstly, let me ask you, Chair, to give me privileges to share. I can see I'm restricted, or must I perhaps forward it to you so that you share from your side?
Let me try to give you privileges to share, and then also forward it to me so that if you've got a challenge, then I can share from my side also. I've given you a privilege. Please check if you can share.
I hope it's this one. I have lots of things on my screen. Yeah, thank you very much. I hope everyone can see the presentation. Is it visible on your side, Chair?
Yeah, it's visible on my side, Mr. Mosese. It says National Perspective on the Marketing System for Agricultural Products.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Chair. And good morning once again to everyone. And indeed, what a privilege to be here to talk to the entire agricultural sector regarding the subject of marketing. As the Chair has already said, my name is Douglas Mosese from the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development. I'm in the Directorate Marketing. Our role as the Directorate Marketing is mainly to develop policies, strategies, and legislation that is aimed at creating an enabling environment for role players to get access to markets. So that's basically what we do at the national level, just creating the fertile ground for market access throughout the Republic. So in short, this is how our presentation will look like. I'm trying to remove this thing on top of my screen. Yeah, I think it's gone now. So I will cover 5 broad items. The background, I will also just talk about the concept of market access. Then I will talk about some of the initiatives that are being implemented from government side in order to break the market access barriers. And then I will talk about the marketing process, as well as covering issues around conclusion. And just to give a little bit of background regarding the outlook of markets currently, we know agriculture is one of the essential sectors within the Republic. And of course, agriculture continued operating even under the lockdown that came as a result of the COVID-19. So that's how important the sector is from the government perspective. And of course, the sector has proven to be very, very resilient during these very difficult and uncertain times. We have noticed from the latest figures released that the sector grew by 15.1% in Q2 of 2020. And of course, this is against the 51% decline that was experienced with regards to the real GDP in the country. And of course, for this growth, we are very grateful to the producers of mainly field crops, horticulture, as well as animal products, because we have experienced some increments in these commodities, and that's what actually resulted in positive growth within the agricultural sector. And of course, on the consumption side, the consumption for major agricultural commodities is projected to grow significantly over the next 10 years, to be precise. We are expecting to see lots of growth with regards to maize, soybean, meat, and as well as citrus. That's according to the figures obtained from the Bureau for Food and BFAP in short. So there is no doubt that the projected growth, obviously, it's lots of good news for producers, because when the consumption goes up, we know demand for agricultural products obviously will definitely go up, and this will create lots of opportunities for value addition and processing sector as well. So that's basically how the markets look like currently, and the short to long-term projections on how the market are projected to look like. When we talk of market access, there is somebody. We are going to hear cigarettes here very soon, Chair. Well, when we, this thing keep on shielding my screen. Okay, the issue of market access has been a very critical issue. Even during the previous dispensation where the governments were controlled, market access was very, very important, and it continues to be like that even today under our deregulated marketing system, because you know in the past the government had established the marketing institutions, normally referred to as marketing boards, to take care of marketing on behalf of producers. And of course, that's how marketing, how important marketing of agricultural products was at the time. And of course, even under the new marketing dispensation, we still as government really view market access in a very, very serious light, because we know that the marketing is actually the backbone of the farming sector. So if you can go on producing your products without any market, then we know you will soon be running into trouble. And market access, in short, is defined as the ability of producers to capture the available market opportunities. So three very important keywords there: the ability on the part of producer to seize the available market opportunities. So in our view, as the department, the market is always there. Mainly because with agricultural products, people eat every day. Every day you wake up in the morning, you have to have breakfast. You also need to have lunch. Later, you must have dinner. So, which means market for agricultural products, it's a very continuous kind of a process where really there is no extinction for this kind of market. And obviously, we acknowledge that in as much as the market is always available, obviously there are challenges that normally hinder producers' access. And I think we are going to be addressing some of those challenges as we move over into the next slides. And like I said, the producer's capability to seize market opportunities is a very critical element of market access component. And there's also another very, very important part. the willingness on part of the market to accept the produce from the producers. I think that's also a very important aspect, because as a producer, if you can want to release your products to wherever, as long as there's nobody willing to accept those products, then you are in trouble. And of course, like I said, Chair, we do believe as a department that market access is basically a sign of very big problems within the marketing system. So we wouldn't say market access itself is a problem, but as long as there is problem of market access, then that means there are other problems that needs to be addressed in the sector or within the market value chains. So now let's quickly look at the barriers that we at least know from interacting with producers. Obviously, we always get what their problems are. One of the major problems, obviously, in the free marketing dispensation is price fluctuations. Just 2 weeks ago, we had a webinar on fresh produce marketing. We had one farmer who made a presentation as well, and the issue of prices was quite a very big issue for that particular farmer. And we know the issue of fluctuating price is always a very big problem for producers, but at the same time, it can also be an opportunity, because in the midst of any problem, obviously, there are also opportunities, because we know with prices, if prices go down today, we know in one way or the other, they are bound to go up again at some stage as the time goes on. So the fluctuating prices is a problem, but at the same time, it presents lots of opportunities to those entrepreneurs who really do their planning properly, and they have the requisite infrastructure to manage the flow of products from their farms to different markets. And of course, perishability is also a very serious issue, particularly for those who do not have the required facilities, particularly for fresh produce. Obviously, the shelf life there, it's very low, and immediately after harvest, the majority of our farmers have to really release the products and make sure it gets to the market as soon as possible. But of course, again, the problem itself presents another opportunity for somebody who creates capacity on his farm or in his business enterprise to be able to store the produce when they are in bumper supply and release at a later stage when there is shortage in the market. Because most of the time, you always have very low prices when the product is in season. And as the season progresses and it gets out of season, that's where you begin to see some very, very serious improvements in prices. So it's a huge opportunity for those who prepare themselves for these kinds of opportunities. But one biggest problem we have noticed, particularly with our smallholder producers, is the issue around planning. Sometimes as the department, we would get a call from the producer. The producer would be saying, look, I have problems. I have lots of cabbage here on my farm. I don't have a market for it. Obviously, the issue of marketing, honestly speaking, that is the role of the producer and not the role of the government. But of course, because we are a government that cares for its own people, the government every now and then goes an extra mile and try to assist those who have those kinds of problems. But because of poor planning, they always run into troubles. Because most of the time people produce, and then later on they start to think about the market. But the question in that process is, what are you producing and for which market? Sometimes you decide to go for cabbage, you decide to go for tomato. But the question again is, why cabbage and tomato? Why not onion? That's a very, very critical question that we always must ask ourselves as producers. And of course, like I said, they would come and say, look, I have a problem. The cabbage is here, I can't sell. Where do I sell? Sometimes if you know a place where they can say, you say, okay, try there. They go try their best there. When they get there, then they produce a huge cabbage, a very big one. And the market there is not interested in a very big cabbage. People these days want to at least consume and finish as soon as possible. They want to avoid as far as possible to consume rotten stuff. I think we have a very practical case to really allude to this issue. We had one farmer in the past, I would not want to mention details of that farmer, who approached the provincial department about the problem they had. They had lots of cabbage in the fields, no market. And the province assisted them to link them with the market. They delivered cabbages to one fresh produce market that I also cannot mention by name. When their cabbage arrived there, it was a very big cabbage. Now they thought the consumer would just be interested in it just because it's big. But the problem was people buying on that market are mainly hawkers who wants to buy and sell, and they want to buy in bulk. This cabbage has to be packaged. When it gets to the market, the agent says to them, look, your cabbage is loose. Can I package it for you? The producer says, yes, please help me package the cabbage for me. They did. And then in a bag of cabbage, those cabbages were so big that only 3 was enough to fill up the bag. And then you had cabbages from other producers, where in one bag you can have 8, you can have 6, 8, you can even have 10. And now this producer ran into serious problems. When the hawkers came in, they are interested in numbers. These bags are equal in size. The other one has got many cabbages. The other one has got fewer cabbages. And now they kept on going to the ones that are many in a bag. And the farmer was in trouble. Now the agent phones the farmer to say, look, your cabbage is not moving, mainly because the buyer prefers to buy lots of smaller sizes because it makes sense for them to buy large numbers and they go and sell. Now, the farmer was left with 2 options. Either leaving the cabbage on the market floor and risk having their cabbage getting rotten on the floor and lose everything. And then option number 2 was for them to go pick up the cabbage and go sell it in a market where a very big cabbage can be accepted. And that, of course, for a farmer was an additional cost because the farmer is situated over 100 kilometers from the market. So now it was another additional cost for the farmer to go pick up the product, go back and resell in another market that accepts bigger sizes, where the consumer is really interested in big sizes. So with this, I'm just trying to highlight that sometimes it can be very, very costly not to do the planning properly. So I'm actually of a very strong view that it is very, very critical that before you go into production, before you put your seed on the ground, at least know which market are you targeting, and talk to the market, because the markets are always ready. They are always willing to listen when you talk to them, and they are always willing to share information in terms of what is it that moves and what is it that really doesn't move at all. So it's very, very critical that when we do the production, then we put the market in mind first, so that whatever we produce, then it's in line with what the market requires, so that tomorrow we don't have problems where now we are supplying the wrong products to the market. And when the market rejects it, then it becomes something else because it becomes really, really costly. And one of the problems, of course, is the scale of production on the part of producers. Some of the smaller producers obviously do smaller volumes. And this does not give them sufficient economies of scale to justify transporting the products to the market. Again, on the economies of scale, you find that this producer is only doing so little. But you'd find the producer is still interested in moving the product from Guruman to Joburg market. Ultimately, they incur so much costs instead of just maybe looking somewhere locally, because if your volumes are not really that big, obviously you find that most of your market is just around you. So, but I think in instances where the scale allows, then that reduces the per unit cost of transportation. But where the volumes are really low, then marketing becomes a big problem because you can only sell within your locality. That's the only area where it makes sense for you to sell your products. Of course, another issue is quality problems. I think we know much about this one. Say sometimes our producers produce, but most of the time you find that the quality leaves much to be desired. And that's why in this area of work, you have the department really working very hard to try and share as much information as possible with producers with regards to the minimum quality standards that are required in terms of the South African laws. But you know, in addition to the minimum standards set by the government, then you would have different market also setting their own quality requirements. And it's also very, very important to always engage them to understand what is it that they are looking for and what is their definition of good quality product. A very critical issue. And another matter, obviously, transactional cost, but I think I just spoke about this one when I addressed the issue around the scale of production, because the farmers, sometimes their volumes, especially those with smaller volumes, they always find themselves in trouble with transactional cost, like I said previously. Another issue now is production cost versus price. This one also appears to be very, very serious problem for producers. And again, when you talk about smaller producers, their biggest problem becomes economies of scale again. You'll find that the scale of production is so small that you can't even buy your fertilizer in bulk. So everything you buy in smaller quantities, which means you pay a huge price for every unit you buy. And then at the end of the day, because of that production practice that you are having on your farm, then you would find that your production cost is relatively higher compared to your competitors. And then ultimately you find that the prevailing market price now places you on a losing side of the situation. So this also can be a very serious problem, and it requires producers to really think deeper in terms of how they go about production. In the area where you have smaller producers, in smaller volumes, sometimes it's better for them to cooperate and try to work together as a unit and consolidate their volumes so that when they go for inputs, then the volumes give them the advantage to at least negotiate some discounts or some fair deal with the suppliers, because with smaller volumes, most of the time, if you are going there to buy one bag of fertilizer, even if you negotiate, no one would really be interested to listen to you. But that ultimately becomes your problem when you begin to think about market at a later stage, because the market, how the price is set in the market, yes, it's demand and supply dynamics. It would not depend on how much it costs you to produce the product, which means as a farmer, in order for you to succeed in the marketplace, you need to start by managing your cost of production first, so that you can begin to have some price advantage in the marketplace. And of course, we also note that some of the markets have very stringent additional standards. Normally within government, obviously there are minimum standards that the products needs to meet in order to be acceptable to markets in generally. But most of the time we get to have situations where different buyers try to differentiate themselves by requiring some very, very strict compliance to certain standards. And of course, from government side, in as much as we have our own government standards, sometimes we do not have the powers to go to whichever retailer and say, look, you need to lower your standards from A to B. So sometimes the government would not have those powers, and even the producer himself, you would not be able to do that, which means now when you do the production and you know you are producing for Woolworths, then you've got to really know what the standards are in that market, and you have to really follow certain program that would comply with the requirements of that specific market. And the same applies if you produce for other retailers, or if you produce for fresh produce markets as well. Very critical to understand what qualities are required, so that whatever you produce then becomes very, very acceptable by the market. Another challenge, I think I've already spoken about this one, where somebody goes into production thinking that somebody is coming to do the marketing for me. I think this one is a challenge. It's a very big challenge that we really need to address, because our history and our knowledge tells us that the farmers who normally succeed are those who take full responsibility for their farming activities. So the responsibility would start from production up until finally they have the product on the shelf. So those are the farmers who normally make it in the marketplace. So normally if you have this thing of saying, okay, let me produce, somebody will help me to find a market. Let's say you produce something and you go to a particular market, but you go there being accompanied by a government official, and a government official is going to be negotiating for you. That creates, on its own, creates a very big barrier for yourself, because yes, the official will help you, but then the buyer on the other side is thinking, what kind of a business person am I dealing with here? What kind of risks am I getting myself into if this person cannot even come and talk to me one-on-one as business people? So in as much as government assists, but sometimes is the best practice for a farmer take responsibility for the whole chain of his own product, because that's what businesses normally do. So it's a very good practice. But like I said, we sometimes acknowledge good efforts by the government, particularly provincial departments. Some of them, they do help farmers in terms of linking them directly with markets. But I think that is not supposed to be a permanent arrangement. They can assist you today, or when you have learned, then you are able to move on your own and be able to market your own products for yourself. And that also gives you really the opportunity to know your market and formulate the much needed relationship. Because we learned that in agricultural markets, sometimes relationship becomes more important than anything else. But if you always have Mr. Mosese in front of you and you are running behind him, so it means the relationship that is being built, there is the relationship between Mosese and the market, and not yourself as a farmer. So those are some of the critical things that we need to look at. And of course, we also acknowledge that there is some level of reluctance on the part of markets themselves to work with new participants. So sometimes, once there is a good relationship between a certain retailer and a certain farmer or a certain group of farmers, then they would want to stick to that grouping. And any new person that comes in finds themselves having to go through some very serious hurdles before they can access that market. And from our side, we do believe that sometimes perhaps it's necessary to do dealings or to do marketing based on merit, based on quality of what the farmer supplies, and not necessarily based on other issues such as your relationship matters and so forth. But unfortunately, within the marketplace, it looks as if the relationship plays a huge role there. So if there is no relationship, you always find yourself wanting or struggling, or sometimes they will only accept your products when they are unable to get the products elsewhere. So I think that's a bit of a challenge. And of course, we can call on the markets to consider really relaxing their requirements, particularly when it's not necessarily on quality, but on this whole issue of wanting to work with the people. We know sometimes, yes, for any person, not really so desirable to start new relationships, but sometimes it can be rewarding, or sometimes it can help the next person if you are on the other side of the shelf and you are extending your hand to the new relationships. And of course, another very serious impediment is competition from international producers. We just received a question from the gentleman who is talking about competition on the marketing of fish from other countries. I don't remember whether he spoke about China or which country. So that also can be a challenge. And but of course, if it's a fair competition, it's not a problem at all. The problem normally arises when the competition is unfair, like in a situation where people realize they don't consume certain products and then they begin to just dump them in another country at almost nothing. That becomes unfair competition, and that's where now the trade remedies that Ausipindi was talking about begin to kick in. But obviously, this is one part that is normally dealt with from the ITEC or the DTIC. Now, let's talk a little bit about how we can break the market access barriers. I'm going to start on my right on the blue boxes. Like I said previously, the producer is actually responsible for A to Z of marketing. I think we must never really make a mistake of thinking that marketing can be relegated to another person, because marketing is actually a very important part of any business. If you go into any, let alone farming, if you go into any form of business, without really thinking about the market first, obviously you are playing with fire there, because you risk losing everything that you are going to be investing in that business. So this issue of marketing, critical part of business management. So whenever we think of managing our own businesses, managing our own farms, marketing must always be the first thing, because that's where you will ultimately get your money back. So you can plant, you can buy fertilizers and do whatever, but as long as you haven't managed marketing, then you do not get the money that you have plowed into the soil back into your pocket. So like I said, marketing begins before you put the seed on the ground. And of course, the production plan on the part of producers must be driven by the market. When you are going to be producing onion, or you want to produce tomato, you need to have a reason why you are producing tomato. Where are you taking this tomato after producing it? That's a very fundamental question, because sometimes producing without planning, you end up producing what the market does not require. I think this I elaborated more on it based on the cabbage example I gave earlier, because that is a very, very big problem on the side of producers sometimes, especially when you look at the smallholders. So just also to emphasize the market-driven production, I think it still talks to the issues we spoke about above, and the issue around knowing the standards and making sure you comply to the required standards. That is very critical, because you can have an agreement with whoever buyer, with Boxer or whoever, that you would supply them with your tomatoes. But if tomorrow, when you deliver, they find that your tomatoes do not meet their minimum standards, then you are in trouble. They will not accept that. And I don't think there's anyone who would want to be accepting the products that are not up to standards. So compliance to standards is very, very critical. But this starts with understanding what the standards are. Like I said, within the government, there are minimum standards, which producers must familiarize themselves with. And within different businesses, different markets as well, there are different standards, because the markets requires to have their own standards so that they can differentiate amongst themselves, so that the consumer must have a reason why they must not buy from Spar and buy from Pick and Pay. I'm just giving an example. So it's all about differentiation, some of the standards that they bring in, because the minimum standards are mainly set by the government. Again, when we look on the market and market intermediaries, normally when you talk to some of the markets, particularly the retail outlets, they would tell you about quite a long list of the things that people must comply with. And to get that information, you really must work extremely hard. You really need to make lots of calls, send lots of emails. I do believe that because they are a very important market for producers, there's a need that they have very clear and transparent standards, something that can be accessed by anybody at any time, so that everyone knows what are the standards for these different supermarkets and for different marketing channels for that matter. That is very, very critical, just so that the information can flow and also to enable producers to really produce their produce from a very well-informed position. Again, the issue around transparent terms of trade. That is very, very important, so that when producers get into any agreement with anybody, then already they know what they are getting themselves into. So I'm just going to give you one example of one marketing channel that is really, really very transparent. When you go there knowing. When you look at the, say, the national fresh produce markets, for example, when you deliver there, already you know, I'm delivering to this agent based on the arrangements, and then you know about the commission that will be deducted from your produce. You know about the fees that will be deducted from the product. So you know everything basically before you even supply. And then it becomes very easy in that case for producers to plan their products. So I think the very same kind of transparency we see within the national fresh produce markets, I think we will do much better if the same could be replicated to other marketing channels. Because within that marketing channel of fresh produce, you even know information such as, if my products get sold today, when must I get paid? That, all of that information is publicly available information, and then it makes it so much easier for those wanting to deal with that marketing channel. So I believe the transparency from other marketing channels is very, very critical, and we can learn a lot from the fresh produce markets. And of course, another issue is issue around provision of equal market opportunities to all producers or suppliers. Procurement to be done based on merit rather than on relationships and other factors. Because we notice that in the markets, there are quite lots of factors that people look at. I think I've already spoken about some of them in the previous slide, where sometimes because my supplier has always been this person, then you would find that I really get married to this person. Another person only get a chance when my main supplier is not available, and most of the time I will avail that opportunity to them at the very unfavorable terms and conditions. So I think those are some of the things that the markets themselves need to really look at, because as a country, I think we need our farming sector to thrive, and in order for the sector to really succeed, we need the markets to come to the party and begin to assist the government in developing the agricultural sector and ensuring that whichever growth we realize, then it's a growth that is really, really inclusive, and you have everyone included within the growth that we shall be experiencing. I mean, we have seen from the previous slides that we anticipate consumption to keep on going up. But if we work together as the government and the entire value chain, we can do so much better in terms of ensuring that ultimately everyone is part of this particular growth. Another very critical element is the issue around the timers payments. Some channels take really, really too long to pay producers. They take so long that sometimes by the time they release the money, you find that the producer is out of business already. I think these are some of the things that we really need to deal with in order to break some of the barriers that exist within the marketing system. Like I said, from the government side, the main issue indeed, the main role of the government is to provide an A+, to provide the grease that will make the wheels of the market machinery to move smoothly. And of course, that is the role that this government is playing in agricultural markets in terms of legislation, policy, and regulation. And of course, I can cite three legislations that normally play a huge role on the marketing of agricultural products. The first one is the Marketing of Agricultural Products Act 1996. Obviously, this is the act that ushered in a free marketing dispensation in South Africa to create an environment where any producer is free to trade with anyone within the Republic without any restrictions. And the act also provides for the industry to come together and achieve some of the common goals of the industry, such as, say, collection of levies for the purpose of generating market information, for the purpose of doing research within the sectors. So those are just some of the examples that the legislation provides for. And of course, there's also Agriculture Produce Agents Act. This one it provides for regulation of fresh produce market agents specifically, so as to protect the interests of the producer. So that's basically the role of this particular legislation, because we know for the producer supplying the fresh produce markets, basically the producer takes his products to the market and that product remains under the ownership of the farmer up until it is sold. Therefore, in that space, obviously, it's very critical that there is legislation that regulates the business that goes on in there to make sure that the interests of producers are always protected. And of course, that includes the issues around the requirements for agents to regularly report to producers on the progress of their produce, and also providing timelines within which producers must be paid for their products. So that's one of the legislations that play a huge role. And then we have also Agricultural Products Standards Act. Now, this one provides the standards. It makes it very possible. It makes it possible for people to now trade easily, because there are standards, you know, when you communicate with the market and you have class 1. Once you say class 1, everybody knows what you mean, because there are regulations that are issued in terms of this legislation to guide the whole sector on what the standards are for different commodities. So on the policy side, we have the agricultural marketing policy for the Republic of South Africa. And then we also have the integrated marketing strategy for agriculture, forestry, and fisheries. The policy, together with the strategy, provide for the marketing support programs that need to be implemented, particularly from the government side in partnership with the sector at large, in order to try and make sure that the marketplace become very, very favorable for all kinds of producers. So that's basically some of the policies that the government is currently implementing to ensure that the market access does not become a very big problem within the Republic. And of course, there's currently a policy within government that is being developed, which is the Agriculture and Agro-Processing Master Plan. Obviously, this one also will play a huge role in creating new markets within the Republic and maintaining the existing markets that are already existing, and making sure that we promote value addition, because the more value you add to the products, that way you actually create more and more markets. Because what we realize as a country is that can we? Yeah, thank you. Yeah, what we realize is that as a country, most of the time, maybe we need to deal with. There's somebody with music in the background. Maybe if at least they can allow me to go on. Thank you very much.
Sorry for that. I'll deal with that. Sorry for that.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chair. When you look at our sector in South Africa, we export lots of raw agricultural commodities. And In the process of exporting raw commodities, we export some of the jobs that should have been created within the South African economy. Because when you export your soybean, when it gets to that particular market, it means jobs will be created there because somebody will have to be employed to crush the soybean to soy oil cake and so forth. So with the master plan, what we are trying to do now is to promote value addition and processing of agricultural products domestically, which will actually assist us in terms of creating or otherwise increasing the value of agricultural production domestically. So it's a very, very important policy that is currently being developed at the government level. And like I said, the biggest goal of government is to create an enabling environment. And these are some of the projects or programs that are being implemented by the government to ensure that we level the playing fields in the marketplace. One of the initiatives is the provision of market information, just to ensure that everyone is informed about the markets. So as government, we have the agricultural marketing information system. Through the system, we publish prices for a variety of commodities. Like when you look at the fresh produce, we publish prices for almost all fruits and vegetables that are sold throughout the Republic, but we publish prices of those that moves through the fresh produce markets. And we also have prices around grains and livestock as well. And this information, with this information, we try as far as possible to really make sure that the sectors are always informed about what the conditions are in the marketplace, and to also facilitate a process where producers will be able to go into market negotiations with their eyes open. Because in the past, we've had lots of problems where producers would just give their product away. The recent cases we have seen somewhere within South Africa at a time when grain prices were really high. We had producers selling their maize at around 1,000 rands per ton. I can't remember which year was that, but at that time, average producer prices were moving at around 4,000, 5,000. But we had producers who really sold very, very low. And ultimately, they felt that they were being ripped off by the market. But we presented a different view and say, look, the market didn't rip you off. But the problem is you went to them without any information, because all the years you have been supplying, they've been paying you 1.2, 1.3. So you just continue in the same way, not knowing what the prices are in the market. So with the market information system, we try to resolve this problem to ensure that everyone has got the same amount of information. It's always a problem for a farmer to go negotiate terms of trade without any information on which to benchmark their pricing. So we also have the agricultural marketing capacity building program, which is being implemented in collaboration with provincial departments to ensure that we empower producers on agricultural marketing so that they do have understanding on how the markets work. And we also organize through the program the market exposure visits for producers to make sure that we get them into contact with markets, and then we allow them to get first-hand information from the markets in terms of what the market requires. And this also provides an opportunity to producers to actually enter into some forms of agreement. But like I said, from our side, we do believe the best we can do is to bring the producer and the market together. What they do when they are together, then it becomes a pure business between two business people. So that's basically the approach we are taking on this one. But like I said, we do have exceptional cases where the government really is doing so well in terms of linking them directly with markets. So that is just the government extending its hand beyond what it is actually mandated to do. So we also issue import and export quota permits. So we do this to really implement some of the trade agreements that MEPIND spoke about earlier, like we issue the permits for imports and exports of different agricultural commodities. But like I said, these ones are mainly it's not like the permit, the normal permit you would import or to export, but this one is a permit that allows you to get some level of rebate on the import duties. But otherwise, you still have a responsibility to get other forms of permits that are required in order for you to be able to export or import any agricultural products within the Republic. And we also, together with the PSEII, implement the certification program to ensure that the produce that comes out of some of this farm, then it's the produce that is very safe for human consumption, and to also try and provide assurance to some of the marketing channels that, you know, these are products that are really very safe to be put on the shelves for sales to consumers and so forth. And we also analyze the market value chains, whereby we identify opportunities as well as challenges that exist within different market value chains, and also just to present some long-term trends in different market value chains. So this information also, we are producing it just to help the sectors to get to understand the markets better, because what we notice is that the understanding about the markets is still very, very limited. So we try with this information to encourage the entire sector to have more understanding about the markets, to get to understand the different value chains better. And of course, the government also has a responsibility to provide support in the form of infrastructure to enable marketing of agricultural products. I know the comprehensive agricultural support program has marketing as one of the pillars, and we also have on and off farm infrastructure as one of the pillars that are being funded under that support program. And in as far as market infrastructure is concerned, obviously once that is in place, then it makes it very easy for producers and other role players to trade with one another. Now, this is just to try and emphasize the points we have made earlier. There's something that keeps on popping on my screen here. Like I said, marketing, it's not a once-off event. It's actually a chain process. Just to emphasize the point again, marketing must actually begin even before you plant. Before you put your seed on the ground, have an idea, where am I going to sell? What are the requirements? And of course, marketing at the end of the day is dictated by one very important role player within the value chain, the consumer. We know the producer, when they are on the farm producing, you are not interacting directly with the consumer, but most of the time, the consumer always sends the signal throughout the chain back to the farmer. The consumer normally talk to retailers, and normally the consumer is always silent but very loud, because if you have something on the shelf that they don't like, they just move away from it and opt for what they like. And that's a very strong message for anyone selling any product. Once you see consumers doing that, then you know, there's something wrong here. Then you have to fix some of the things. And through their behavior, the consumers, like I said, they send their signal to retailers. Retailers will send it back to their suppliers and so forth. And the signal must ultimately get back to the farmer. But as a farmer, how do you get the signal from the consumer? You normally get the signal from the guy closest to you. We have a very long agricultural value chain, but within the chain, there are various players who act very closely together. Like, for example, the producer would be very close to a miller. I mean, the grain producer would be very close to the guy who mills, who makes maize meal. That's the guy who will actually transmit information from consumer to the farmer. And the miller gets that information also from retailers and other areas where they normally supply their products to. So it is very, very critical that as a farmer, we must always be asking a question to say, what does the consumer on the table require? What do they want? And we will only get it by talking to our next guy within the value chain. Grain producers will get that information from millers and other people who buy grains. Fresh produce guys will get that from fresh produce markets, also from retailers. And then livestock guys also get the signals mainly from the abattoirs. So communication between producers and the guy next to them, very, very critical. And that's what will ensure that the entire value chain runs smoothly and we don't get to have lots of food losses. Because if we manage our production systems on the farm such that every product can be accepted by the market, then we will be addressing a very serious food security problem. Because due to quality problems, currently, it's just that I don't have the numbers anymore, but we know that lots of food actually gets lost through the value chain, and they get lost for a variety of reasons. But one of the reasons is quality deterioration. And if we can manage this thing to say, you produce exactly what is required in terms of quality, ultimately we will reduce the losses within the market value chain, because whatever we produce then will be accepted by the local market. And if the local market cannot accept everything and the quality is good enough, then that's where the international market kicks in. So, but that is provided the quality is really of a very high standard and it can be accepted in the international markets. And then instead of having them as losses, then we can have those products as revenues and also earn some foreign exchange out of those products of very, very good quality. In conclusion, Chair, I would like to reiterate that indeed for the entire Republic, due to the COVID-19, the economic outlook doesn't look so good on a macro level. But when you look within the sector, indeed we have recorded some very positive growth, which is something very much appreciated. So we really need to appreciate the farmer for a sterling job that they have done within the sector. So their contribution to the economy is being noticed even more now because of the COVID-19 and the problems that we are facing economy-wide throughout the Republic. And like I said, the future of agricultural markets look very, very bright, with the consumption projected to grow rapidly over the upcoming 10 years. The BF Hub has done some studies. The outcomes show that the consumption for lots of commodities is projected to really grow significantly. This actually talks to the future of agriculture. It talks to the future of farmers. It also gives farmers information to say, look, the opportunities that exist within the sector, they are still there and they are projected to keep on growing. So let's prepare ourselves. Let's empower ourselves, working together with the government and other role players. Let's ensure that we are all empowered enough to be able to capture the opportunities that will be presented by the growth that is projected for the next 10 years. And like I said, the issue around the sector positioning itself, very well in order there. We really need to position ourselves together as a sector, working together as a collective, of course. And like I said in my previous slides, I think we really need our markets to lend a helping hand here and contribute towards inclusive growth. This one is a very, very critical point. Where producers do quality, let's appreciate the quality that they bring and let's reward them accordingly based on the quality of their produce. And like I said, marketing is a chain process and not just a small part of the chain. And of course, as the department, we are available to work in close collaboration with role players within agricultural value chain in an effort to try and continue to implement programs that will ultimately lead to inclusive growth and also create conducive environment for everyone within the sector to gain access to markets. I think those are the few slides I wanted to share with this forum, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Atlas Mosesa. We thank you for the presentation. What we are going to do now, we'll request some questions, inputs from participants. We'll take only 5 hands. Questions, inputs, comments from participants. But before I take the hands, let me read what is in the chat boxes. The question that is in the chat box is that, are there any workshops, training provided for small, medium producers in relation to marketing? Is there any workshops, training provided by for small, medium producers? I think this question is directed to the government. Is government providing these trainings for small, medium producers, especially the training around marketing? The other question is that, what recourse does farmers, both South African and non-South African, have in terms of the provision of the Agricultural Produce Agents Act, particularly around recovery losses out of the misconduct of the agent? It's from Shepard. He says, what recourse does farmers, both South African and non-South African, have in terms of the provision of the Agricultural Produce Agents Act, particularly around the losses arising out of the misconduct of the agent? Colleagues, for those who want the presentation from Mr. Mosesa, please write your email address. We'll share the presentation immediately after this webinar. Those who want to raise their questions directly, inputs or comments, please raise up your hand. You'll be notified, then you'll be identified, then you can raise your questions to Mr. Mosesa. We'll take 5 questions and then we can move to the next presenter. Any question? Any comments, inputs? I think, Mr. Mosesa, while waiting for inputs and comments, you have covered the issue of the importance of feasibility study. Like any other business, agriculture is a business. Therefore, it's important for people to do feasibility study before you even enter the business. You cannot just plant and later after harvesting and say, now I'm looking for market after planting. You can do that if you're a subsistence farmer. You're just planting for you to go and eat. But if you're going to sell, you have to identify your market before you can even start planting. That's what Mr. Mosesa said in summary. Ronnie McKenzie, your hand is up. You can give your input or comment. McKenzie, Ronnie McKenzie. Ronnie McKenzie.
Oh, thank you. How are you, sir?
I'm okay, Mary and Ronnie. And how are you doing? Can you can please ask or make your input?
Yeah, my input would like to be to emphasize a lot in terms of the very access to market issue, that as farmers, we do really feel that government needs to be the one that leads in terms of access to market. We've got more than enough prisoners. We've got more than enough patients in hospitals. We've got soldiers. We've got all kinds of government people that needs to be eating. How about if government takes the first initiative to give directive even to its own employees to be procuring from so-called emerging farmers, as we are called. In that sense, we'd be able to see farmers focusing on farming than to have more worries about markets, about all types of things that we find we are challenged with. We can no longer find farmers having to plow back their produce because of access to market. The market is there. The market is you as government. And even those that you award tenders to should be given directive that the criteria to pass is to procure from so-called emerging farmers. In that way, we'd be able to curb all the challenges that we
I think we have lost you there, Ronnie.
are facing as farmers. Sorry?
We
I
lost
say
you.
I would leave it here for now.
Okay, okay. Thank you so much, Ronnie. Thank you so much. Mr. Musesen, please just make your response to the questions raised on the chat box and also the question coming from Ronnie. Over to you, Mr. Musesen.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Chair, and thanks to the audience for the questions. On the question regarding training on marketing for small, medium producers, indeed, we do offer training on marketing. We advise those in need to get in contact with their provincial departments of agriculture, particularly the agricultural economics divisions within the provinces. If they liaise with the provincial departments, specifically agricultural economics, then they will get lots of help with training on marketing. So we normally work very closely with provinces. So we advise clients to be in contact with their provincial departments. And the second question was relating to a record of recovery monies for losses incurred by farmers as a result of dishonest conduct by some of the agents. Well, on this one, indeed, the law is law. APA Act is there. The regulations are in place. They are very clear in terms of the processes that needs to be followed. And if the farmer loses money at the hands of agents, and there is sufficient evidence to prove that the money was lost as a result of dishonest conduct on the part of agents, then those farmers must contact the Agricultural Produce Agents Council. I will not have the records in terms of the numbers, but I know there is a very good record in terms of how much APAC has assisted producers in terms of disciplining agents who normally take producers for a ride. And if producers, the case itself qualifies producers for a refund, then APAC has always refunded those producers of their monies. But remember, in order to qualify for any refund, then the losses must have been as a result of dishonest conduct by agents, not anything else. So if you take your products to the market and the quality deteriorates while the product is on the market floor, then that would not be one of the qualifying incidences. If you lose due to quality issues, then the APAC will not kick in. But if your losses are as a result of dishonest conduct, or maybe let's put it simple, if it's as a result of theft on the part of agents, then APAC is obliged by law to refund the farmers and later on see how they are going to recover that money from the agents themselves. So I think the third one by yourself, Chair, was mainly a comment about the importance of visibility. Yes, indeed, very, very critical. Let's put the market first. The third question is about institutional buying, having the government buying directly from farmers is also more of a comment. We noted it's a very critical aspect. Maybe indeed this is one of the things we must begin to look at and see whether we can really go anywhere as government as far as some of these matters are concerned. But like I said, this is actually not going, it's not a very, very easy kind of process to embark on, but I think it's something that is worth considering, particularly given the fact that indeed market access is a very big issue. Maybe there could be a case within the government to start looking at this matter. I think it's a matter that we will note, and we will actually escalate it within the relevant structures in the department and see whether there can be an opportunity to explore this part of work. I think those are the questions we have so far. We had 4 questions, and I guess I've addressed all of them.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Douglas Mosese. I don't know if this question you'll be able to address it or is directed to Pindiwe. One of you must address it. The question is that, to what extent have African farmers been able to grow their products and market since 1994? What is the level of their growth? I don't know if this is directed to you or Pindiwe, or someone can answer it. It's from Tobeko, non-Tobeko Yawa. To what extent have African farmers been able to grow their products and market since 1994? What is the level of their growth? Will you attempt to answer that, Mr. Mosese?
Definitely. Currently, we do not have any statistics in terms of how much they have grown since 1994. But there's currently a process of farmer register. Perhaps that's one process that will help us to actually profile our producers and get to understand the growth that they have gone through since the inception of democracy to date. So I think if they can all be registered and then we know all our small farmers within the Republic, then we can begin to track their progress from the date of registration. Maybe we can begin to talk about this question in some years to come again. But to provide the answer without giving any specific numbers, we have indeed seen huge growth in terms of the number of African farmers playing a role, both in terms of agricultural production generally, and also in the markets. So we have several cases that we can present of African producers who are today almost commercial, actually, because they are doing very well for themselves. But like I said, we would not have statistics because when we started in 1994, we actually didn't have a baseline at all. So then it becomes very difficult to measure to what extent have they made progress. And another thing that makes it a little bit difficult, when producers supply different markets, the products don't get recorded in terms of their demographics. Maybe the only area where we can have some info, it's for those supplying the fresh produce markets. I know that some info might be available there, but the producers supply a wide range of marketing channels. So sometimes it's a little bit difficult to track them and see how much money African producers derive in the markets and so forth. But I guess if our process of profiling our producers come all right, then we can start our baseline from the day we have a complete farmer register, and then we can begin to track them from that angle onwards. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ndate Mosese. The last question from Sibongile Tekana says, looking at the market barriers presented, how does government intend to protect the local producers from foreign product dumping? Looking at the market barriers presented, how does government intend to protect the local producers from foreign product dumping? Let me check if there are some hands from the gallery before we can move on. There are no hands. I think now you can respond to Ndate Mosese.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I will take a bite on this one. If Medingile would like to come in, then she can also come in, because I can hear he has got some aspects of local and as well as the international parts of our markets. Well, when you talk about dumping, dumping is actually a very undesirable practice. And as a company, we do have tools to deal with the dumping problem. And like Medingile said earlier, the issue of dumping is an international trade matter, and the protection of South African markets from unfair external competition. Currently, such policies being implemented at APEC. We have the APA Act, which normally, together with its regulations, which plays a huge role in terms of protecting our territory from unfair imports. Because when you talk dumping, dumping is very much unfair, because what it means is you are producing the whole chicken, but then you don't eat chicken feed in your own country. So you normally use feed to feed your dogs or whatever locally within your country. But then you realize, okay, there is a market in South Africa. Let me go just dump my chicken feed there for R1.99 per kg. That's a very unfair trading practice, and it actually qualifies to be looked at by APEC. I know as a country, we have implemented quite a number of anti-dumping duties, particularly within the poultry sector. I mean, the government has been very successful in terms of doing that. But I think if role players experience the same with regards to other commodity groupings, then the role players can actually make application with ITEC to consider looking at the dumping that is currently taking place. But thus far, I think in instances where we have had dumping, ITEC has been very much effective in terms of dealing with that by imposing anti-dumping duties. So I'm not sure whether maybe they would like to have a bite on this one.
Okay, Mepindile, you want to have a bite on that one, or are you fine? But in the meantime, let's take in Morena Kashane. Morena Kashane?
I would need that question to be repeated, please, Chair.
The question that that Mr. San was trying to respond to. Okay, let me go back to the question. The question is basically about what measures are there from government to protect the market from foreign dumping. What measures are there from government to protect the South African market from foreign dumping? Pindiwe?
I'm available, I'm here. There are special safeguards mechanisms that are administered under ITEC. Yeah, that's what I can give today in that question, that ITEC is the leading entity on that. Is trade defense mechanisms that are put in place.
Thank you so much, Pindiwe.
Okay.
There was Morena Kashane question,
yes,
please.
Yes, I'd like to do a follow-up on the issue of the import. And I understand mapping the way Linda Demo said there is an important issue that ITEC can deal well with the issue of the import. But however, especially in my sector, tilapia farming, if the production is not enough, ITEC won't pose any tariffs to Chinese. And I will believe that the solution will be if the government can subsidize the farmers so that we can reduce the production cost, and that will assist us to compete with any cheap imports from anywhere. Thank you.
So must we take that one, Chair?
Come again, Mr. Mosisi. I was.
Oh yes, I was just confused. You had disappeared, so
yeah.
I wanted to be sure you are here first.
It's
so I think,
shedding.
okay, now we understand that. Well, I think Kashani is raising a very important, but I think he's making a follow-up on the question he already asked from Me Dingile's presentation. And the issue around subsidies, Mr. Kashani. The government currently, as it is, the government of South Africa does provide support to businesses. Within the within agricultural sector, you know, there's a comprehensive agricultural support program. So it's a support program that is meant to help producers. I know sometimes people want you to say subsidy. You have to say it like and be explicit about it. But we know very well the government already has got programs to support the producers, and CASP is doing very well in terms of that. And if you like, you can call it a subsidy, because the government is injecting some resources into businesses, but we are injecting them indirectly in the form of some kind of support, like infrastructure support, input support, and all that. So the government is already involved in that space, and the government has got programs to support producers. But if you like to call it subsidy, you can call it that way, but we call it comprehensive agricultural support program. Thank you.
Thank you, Douglas. Any other questions, inputs, comments on Douglas before we take in our last speaker? Any comments, inputs, questions for Douglas? Thank you so much, Douglas. It looks like it was very clear. There's no any further question. I will request colleagues that are in the webinar, take advantage of this session to also network. And the best way to network is to leave your details in the chat box and tell others, what are you selling? What are you farming on? What is your product? Take advantage of that. Share it in the chat box. Some people are looking at the chat box. Then you can find your business partner in the chat box, or you can find a client on the chat box. So take advantage of that, not just only listen to the presenters, but also market your business by sharing your profile in the chat box and leave your contact details. That's the best way that you can take advantage of our webinars and sell your business. Thank you so much, Douglas Mosesen. Without a waste of time, we'll go now to the next presenter, who's the DDG, the department, Ntate Ramuketse. Please, if you are available, switch on your video, Ntate, and then we can start taking your presentation. Please switch on your video, and we can then start taking your presentation.
Trying to do just that, Chair. Unfortunately, there is a power outage in my area, and it just messed up my whole arrangements that I had. If you may, convener of this session, also share the presentation that was sent this morning to you so that we can take it from you, because now I'm using my handset for this presentation. I really appreciate it.
I'll do so.
Okay.
I don't.
Thank you very much, convener. Yeah, I can see it.
Okay.
Thank you very much, convener of the session, Untitled Rakolote, to the organizers of this event, to the executives of different farm organizations, our captains. We have got to pass our gratitude to you as people who are really leading this sector. We also have got to thank the people who are here, who are farmers, who are participants, especially from the agricultural sector, who want to engage on the issues of importance when it comes to agriculture and market access. We have got a presentation that will last almost 20 minutes. I bear no issues in terms of time allocations. And we will run through the 20 minutes very quickly. If we can go through to slide 3, Chairperson. We have got a presentation outline that we have provided. If I may request that you move to slide 3.
Yeah, I'm still struggling on my side. I'll move to slide 3 now. There's some technical glitches here. Just bear with me.
Okay. It's okay. But the presentation is meant to really take you through the issues as outlined in the slides. We will also share the slides with all the participants. Just leave your details, and my colleagues, Mpose Khala and Salamina Mailan, who's responsible for the unit, will also share the presentation with you. This presentation would be an issue that we have got to highlight when it comes to issues relating to market access. And if you don't mind, I can also do it from, I can, Dr. Rakolote, if you agree with me, I can.
Yeah, in the meantime, please do it from your side, and that day, sorry, then we can take it from there. I think.
No. I will take it from my other mechanism, so that we don't waste the participants' time when it comes to issues around market access. I think that would be very important. Chairperson, as you go through and look for the presentation, I will just indicate to you which slide I am on once you get the right level of the presentation. We, as a department, we have got a way that we look at market access. And it's very important that market access is being looked at from a perspective of how we as government are looking at the world. You can look at market access in 2 ways. One, in terms of those products that are to leave the South African borders and have got to be taken to international borders. Or alternatively, you can look at the markets within the country. And I'm very sure that my colleagues have already looked at the aspects that we are speaking about when we talk about the local market access. 2 questions that were asked earlier on, one from President Ronnie McKenzie, President of FUSA, and one that came from Nontobeko, would be responded to when we deal with the issues around this introduction. Next slide. The elements that we need to talk to, I think we cannot talk about market access specifically as the issues that were raised by Sis Nontobeko. We cannot talk about market access if we don't talk about transformation within the sector. And the slide that is in front of us clearly reflects how the issue around transformation is being reflected in our industry, an industry that is on the upward trajectory. It is expected that this industry would grow by between 10 and 15% over the medium term. And during that particular period when it grows, you would also expect that there would be massive black farmer participation in the programs. Where are we currently in terms of this participation? I will not go through each and every one of these, but if you look at maize production, which is something that we think that we might be very cognizant in terms of the planting, only 4.7 of the output comes from black farmers. When you look at citrus, only 12% comes from the black farmers. If you look at wool, it is there where you start seeing a black participation in terms of the higher levels. And then lastly, when you look at the issues around cattle, where you have got 34%, all the statistics point to that level that was asked. What is the participation of black producers in terms of market access? And I think it's very important as setting the scene that we depart from there to say, how do we ensure that there is inclusivity in terms of participation, and two, that there is equitable access when we talk about agriculture. The next slide, convener. When we look at this, we need to also look at the context under which we are presenting. That we have got our 2030 plan, which is the National Development Plan. We have got the National Growth Path, which is the Agenda 2025, and we are at the last year in terms of that deposition. We have got the Industrial Policy Framework. We have got the Industrial Policy Action Plan, and other plans that we previously had. Of late, we had Operation Phakisa, and Operation Phakisa is currently being revamped into the Agriculture and Agro-Processing Master Plan, as outlined by the President, that each and every sector has to have its own master plan. And that is the importance in terms of us moving ahead and ensuring that there is a participation of all. And this brings me to the point that was raised by President of FUSA, Ronnie McKenzie, on the procurement and the accessing of the government market. I think, as Mr. Mosese has indicated, the time is now that we say, how do we ensure that we really have got not only set aside, but ensure that there is small farmers also supply the government market. This is a huge market. If you compare it with the citrus industry that is almost 20 billion, and you look at the current market that we are having in terms of government, you suddenly realize that it's a huge market, huge participation that is needed from Black farmers to ensure that we are all participating in this market. I think that the participation, as reflected earlier on in the first slide on my introduction, would show you that there's still a long way to go. The next slide. Ndata Mosese in his introduction has clearly outlined the value chain. And I think that in terms of that value chain, it's very important to reflect how we support as a department. Now, we have got different ways where we comprehensively support the industry, starting from the issues around how we deal with the loans that are given to our farmers for pre-production, looking at extension services and marketing support. All of those are government interventions that are there. I'll not reiterate what has been indicated by Ndate Mosese, just to allow for the time that we are in. But it's very important that as we look at the whole value chain, we also reflect on how government would be assisting farmers in each and every part of these areas. And this workshop convener would not have come at an opportune time, because most of the time when we engage with mainly smallholder farmers or emerging farmers, depending on the terminology that you would like to use, is that they are not aware of the different steps that government take in terms of accessing foreign markets, and they are also not aware of steps that are there when you have got to access local markets. There are various role players that we have as government that are responsible for each and every step that we take of ensuring that there's market access. Next slide. And this role players start from the Department of Agriculture per se, together with all its entities, including the ARC, the National Agricultural Marketing Council, OBP, which is the Honors that Board Biological Products, and also PPCB, the Perishable Product Export Control Board. So when we talk to the Department of Agriculture, we include all of those. And there are different components within the department that are responsible for that. We also have got the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, which also forms part and parcel of the Technical Barriers to Trade Committee that deals with mostly some of the non-tariff measures that we have. And I'm saying measures because most people would use barrier, but it only becomes a barrier once you have determined that it is distorting the issue of trade. We have got farmer organizations, we have got community-based groups. So those are all the role players. And all of these role players, I would say that have got shared responsibility in terms of market access as outlined by the presentations from my colleagues. Next slide. Now, the next slide. Now, in terms of market access, we take our cue from the World Trade Organization. The World Trade Organization has got a plethora of annexes, but of importance to this presentation are two annexes, the one annexure on sanitary and phytosanitary measures, and the other one on technical barriers to trade. And all of this would form the framework under which the department functions, and it also forms a basis on how our legislative nomenclature is being presented to the outside world. The WTO recognizes 3 sister organizations as standard setting bodies for all the aspects that deal with technical issues. The International Plant Protection Convention, which is the IPPC, which is in green, that is responsible for issues around plant health,
it seems we have lost Ntate Ramasodi. It seems we have lost Ntate Ramasodi. We'll keep on checking him. We have lost him. We have lost Ntate Ramasodi. Sorry for that. We'll keep on checking him so that we can bring him back. We are still trying to bring in Ntate Ramasodi. We have lost him there. I think that's the problem of load shedding within his area that he spoke about. Please bear with us while we try to bring him back. Apologies for that, colleagues. Ntate Ramasodi is reconnecting. It happened that he lost signal. We apologize for that. That's another disadvantage of technology. If we were in a face-to-face meeting, he'll still be with us. But there are also advantages of technologies, because we can all have this session being in our places and various provinces at the same time, instead of driving to one province or one place. So there are advantages and disadvantages of technology. So bear with us. We'll try to reconnect Ntate Ramasodi.
I have reconnected, convener.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And my apologies for that. As I was indicating, then on your extreme right, you would have the World Organization for Animal Health that is responsible for issues around animal health. All of these are what we call non-tariff measures. They do not involve the use of tariffs, but the use of any measure that is outside of tariffs. It is very important to note, convener and attendants, that this is the new measure that is being used in world trade, where most of the countries would use these measures to bar most of the products from coming into their shores. And it's very important that in South Africa, we know the skills around how to deal with the issues if we are met with a challenge where we have got measures that are used now, not as measures, but technical barriers to trade, which is something that we experience on a number of occasions. Next slide. We have got different legislative mechanisms that we apply, whether it's from the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development, or the Department of Health, or the Department of Trade and Industry. And what we have done is that we have color-coded them so that you can see which act is applicable to which department. But it's very important that as we discuss issues around market access, all of these acts are being observed and administered to ensure that we have got market access for our products. Next slide. It is then important to then go through the elements that we have for each and every act that we are having. And earlier on, there were questions that were asked to say, how does government assist farmers to ensure that there is compliance with the issues relating to the laws that we are having? In terms of the current arrangements, we have got what we call the South African Good Agricultural Practices, which the department, together with the Perishable Products Export Control Board, is administering to ensure that farmers are able to access markets. And it's very important in terms of SA GAP that we are currently administering, that it's an entry requirement. We need to also separate that standard, because from where I'm sitting, it's very important that government is responsible for ensuring that there is almost an approach towards ensuring that farmers would meet the minimum standards, which is government standards, and also the minimum standards when it comes to the private standards, which are separately administered by business in this case. In this slide, convener, we attempt to look at different levels on where these acts are applicable. Firstly, in terms of plant and plant products, secondly, in terms of animal and animal products, and then lastly, in terms of agro-processing. All of these have got different interventions that are needed. For instance, if you look at plant and plant products, you would need to be very au fait with the issues that deal with food safety and quality assurance. You would also need to know the private standards, including the issues around HACCP, which is meant to look with the critical control points within any food safety system. And you also need to know the standard operating procedures that are implemented within a broader context. So within each and every element, you would have different levels, public standards and also private standards. And I'll say this, public standards for me are the market access standards. The private standards would then have what I call shelf access. You might have access to the market, comply with all the minimum standards, but when it comes to now accessing the shelf, you might have difficulties in terms of accessing the shelf. So there should be a way of working in tandem to ensure that each and every farmer can access both the market plus the shelf of that particular retailer or wholesaler that we need to target, or even a fresh produce market that we need to target. That is very important. And that is also applicable when it comes to agro-processing, which is the next leg of our value chain. Next slide. In terms of the next slide, we have got different services that we are offering as the department. First of all, it's in terms of the policy space where we have got legislation, we have got policies that we come up with. We also have got to look at how do we ensure that there is a trade balance. For instance, if there is a negotiation that government is establishing with any of the countries that we have in the world, one of the things that we look at is what is the trade balance between ourselves and that particular country. If the trade balance is negative from our side, I think that's where we start pushing to ensure that our products get through to the other side. We also render inspections all through the ports that we are having from Beitbridge to Cape Town. We also have got assignees that we have appointed as the department in terms of different legislative pieces. One of those coming to my mind at this moment is the Agricultural Product Standards Act, where there are assignees that we use to inspect our products. We also do different levels of risk analysis that would allow us to negotiate. We also lead the discussions when it comes to all the three sisters that I had indicated in terms of world bodies, and also at the SPS level. So these are the functions that we do as a department. And these services are at a cost to a farmer, but we also have got our focus in terms of ensuring that there's promotion awareness on the services that we are rendering. And the unit that will appear at the end is the unit that deals with this, led by Mema Elani, and this part of the world done by Ntate Mposekal. Next. In terms of the current export markets that we are pushing, we separate this into two. There are times where you have got to export and the importing country does not have phytosanitary conditions for a particular product that you are exporting, and therefore it would be easy for you to access that market. But on the other side, there are special markets that would require specific conditions. So there's that separation of an ease of access of a market, where you can have a market that does not require any phytosanitary conditions or registration in this case, or alternatively a market that requires registration. So that's something that you as a farmer, a producer, and exporter would have to find out with the department to find out whether you fall within the special market or you are in a market that would not require additional conditions. Next slide. So in terms of the special markets that we are having for this country, we have got a few markets from the plant health sites that we are currently dealing with, and they are there. I'm not going to read all of those, but you would be aware that as a department, we are always negotiating for new markets. We are currently negotiating a few with China. We have just, as a department, being successful in terms of negotiating with the Philippines for the citrus. So these are the export markets, special export markets that we have. They have got special conditions and they are managed by the directorates of the department to ensure that there is total compliance with these markets. Very important in terms of market access. It may be difficult to get market access, but according to me, it is more difficult to maintain those markets. And maintaining those markets would mean that we need total compliance with the requirements of that particular country. Next slide. You would know that there would be challenges that we have got to overcome as a country, as a department, as a sector, as we approach market access and negotiations with other countries. One of those in the animal environment is traceability. You would know that the producer these days is a producer who's well informed. They would know that, want to know that a meat of a pig or pork, as people would call it, has left the farm of President Ronnie McKenzie and it came from this kind of peak, and this is how this peak was fed right through its value chain. So that is something that we are currently dealing with when we deal with issues around traceability. There's also an issue around how we deal with controlled diseases. Quite a few controlled diseases that we have in terms of the Animal Diseases Act that we have got to deal with and ensure that we move faster as a country. There's also an element around our disease outbreaks. Those who are in pork production will tell you that the outbreak of African swine fever has been an Achilles heel in terms of our production system. There's also an issue around health certification or attestations, as we call them, and also issues around vaccinations. Because if you know the control systems that we have, some of them depend on vaccinations, including the one that we have got on foot and mouth disease. So all of these 5 critical areas that have been outlined by the colleagues are very important in terms of ensuring that we have got market access going forward. The next slide. The issues around the challenges when it comes to the plant health environment are mainly in terms of pest incursions that we are experiencing from time to time. You have got various pests that are either in South Africa coming in, or alternatively in some of the countries bordering South African territory. So it's very important as people who are working within the farming industry that we are aware of these challenges that are there and are lacking. Whether you are in the maize industry or in the fruit industry, there are challenges that are there. Whether it's a lethal necrosis virus that we are facing, or it is a fact that we have got to deal with the Panama disease in bananas or Bactroserat zonata in fruit. Those are the issues that we have got to deal with. Next slide. And they are very important because without ensuring that we deal with the challenges that are faced in the plant health environment, we will never be able to access this market. Now, it's very important when we realize these challenges, maybe from a phytosanitary point of view, that we also look at the broader issues in terms of challenges, which also include the issues around the farmer support and the commercialization of black producers, which is something that is contained now under the policy debate that we are dealing. The second one would be the fragmented way and the poor coordination that is being given to farmers. I usually hear us all talking about double dipping and ask myself, if farmers are double dipping, what are the issues that they are double dipping on? Because my experience is that in most instances, what we are providing to farmers is not enough to take them through what they are facing at that stage. And it's very important that we come up with a comprehensive way and approach farmers comprehensively when it comes to finances. Now, the next one would be an issue of organization of black farmers. And I'm very happy that we have got the presidents of different farmer organizations to ensure that there's better organization where we are. Currently, I'm doing some research in terms of the citrus industry, where you have got 12% participation. And when you look at that participation, 47% of those who are within the citrus industry who are black are exporting, while the whole sector, for instance, is just over 60% is based on export. If you do that extrapolation, then you certainly realize that most money can be made in terms of exports, but in terms of participation, very less in terms of black producers are participating. So those are the issues that we need to inculcate in terms of participation of black farmers within the whole industry. Now, we also provide you with a solution design on how we think this would be done in a broader context, where we think when we come up with commodity organizations, we are far much better organized to deal with all the issues, including farm assessments, field audits, market needs, an assessment of areas where everybody who's within the farming community would need to participate. We are also far much better positioned to deal with issues around funding because that's the huge issue in terms of our farmers. So this is almost the model that we are presenting to you, which also include aspects around market access and also looks at how the department would be contributing. It's very important that without that model, we think that we will be clutching at straws when we talk about market access. The next slide. Quite important in terms of us saying what needs to be done. And we provide a few solutions in terms of where we are. We know that we are currently looking at new markets. When it comes to red meat, we are expanding in terms of the China market. We are currently in negotiations to expand the number of people who are exporting to China. That has been agreed, and this morning one of my colleagues was briefing our principal in terms of the new way that we are going to access this market. We are also looking at the USA, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia. The discussions with the USA would be during the course of this week or early next week. And we hope that we will be able to advance the discussions. When it comes to grains, we are looking at different aspects. This year, we are told that we might have a challenge in terms of exports. The team from Plant Health is already working on ensuring that there are exports, including that of barley, because of the challenges that we had on Corona, that the demand for barley in South Africa is low. But the team is already working on the barley exports. In terms of poultry, there is work that is being done in terms of the poultry master plan. We expect that there would be growth in the sector so that we can deal with the issue around import substitution, and we would also deal with issues around exports to the Middle East specifically. In terms of horticulture, there are a few irons that are on the stove around the USA, dealing with avocados, China, same products, and Thailand, where we have got engagements. On the sugar, you would know that the challenges that we are facing are not only for sugar, but it's also to do with the other value chain offsets that are there, energy cogeneration, other streams that can be done. We are looking at that as a department together with the DTIC. And lastly, in terms of wildlife, you would know that we have been in the news of late in terms of trying to deal with the game meat regulations. We are dealing with the bioeconomy strategy and also the veterinary strategy. So there's a composite way and interventions that we are dealing with from an issue around animal health. Next one, in terms of plant health. In terms of the broad brush issues that we have got to deal with, I think we need to have a reflection around transformation. We found it very important to reflect what the minister said when she came into the post. She said, we need to be very genuine and deliberate in transforming this sector. And transformation for me would mean that we should have targets in terms of where we want to go, including targets when it comes to market access, not only when it comes to production, because production without market access, as Ndate Musese had indicated, would be very futile. Now, we are engaging our trading partners in terms of increasing the exports. For instance, our exports in terms of citrus are expected to grow by between 10 and 15% over the next 10 years. This is where we think that it's somewhere where our farmers would participate. We also working on having an agro-processing, agriculture and agro-processing master plan, which we think should have targets in terms of how do we transform the industries, but also how do we make the industries competitiveness, because it's very important to remain competitive as a country and grow the 40,000 or so commercial farmers that we are having. And we are also trying to look at issues around how do we grow our poultry industry. And then lastly, how do we access the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement and ensure that our farmers, all of those who are within the sector, get to also realize the benefits that we had in mind when we negotiated the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. And at that note, Chair, I would like to pause and take questions and apologize for the interruptions that we have had, but that's the beauty of having a session over the internet. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ramasodi. Thank you so much, TDG. Now it's time for comments, inputs, questions. I'll go to Ronnie McKenzie.
Thank you very much, Ndadi. And thank you for the beautiful presentation, Dr. Ramasodi. Dr. Ramasodi, I would like you to jot down, you know, we come very late into the industry, and thank you for the industry having the world to open up. As we've realized now, really look at the number of things. Per se, you know. Am I audible in that? I hear you are interrupting.
Yeah. We lost you somewhere. Maybe you can a little bit go back and start from the beginning, if you don't mind, because we lost you.
Okay. Am I clear now, Daddy?
Yeah, you are very clear, Mr. McKenzie.
Okay. I was saying it's worthwhile for Ntate Ramasodi to jot down, since this COVID has now showed us, you know, we've got to really look at life. And there's becoming a high demand of more of organic related foods in the market right now. And since as blacks become very late in a number of things, not only in the agricultural space, that we find now we are into GM, you know, which likelihood we hardly participated in allowing our country to be in the phase that it's in, where you find we are so heavily onto all these Monsanto products, etc. Can the department find it within itself to source for us, you know, the cultivars that are non-GMO, for instance, soya, maize, etc., which they would be of our farmers, subsistence farmers, or so-called emerging farmers, or those going into commercial that would like to find themselves in the space of planting non-GM, because today it's such a struggle to get the non-GM cultivars out there. And having to speak about the access to markets that the department is embarking with the likes of China, my question then arises that if the department on its own can hardly sit down with your own brothers and sisters from correctional services, from health department, from the schools, to open up the market for their own, how do you expect China allow bula the market for our people, whilst you cannot even do it right here locally? These are just but those that I would like to put for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ronnie. Mr. Ramasuma? Mr. Mwekeza?
Thank you very much. I was jotting down what President McKenzie was saying. He raises very poignant point when it comes to the issue around the organic focus that we are having. And obviously, at this stage, going organic is going to fetch us a premium price anywhere that we would go. And therefore, organic farming as an option or a technology in terms of farming is always welcome by the department, and it's also one of the areas that we are currently pushing as a department or promoting as a department. I was in a meeting this morning with my colleagues who are currently facilitating the implementation of conservation agriculture, which is very important for us as we go and attempt to deal with the challenges that we have around hunger. The Sustainable Development Goals, specifically Sustainable Development Goal 2, which deals with zero hunger, has got a specific objective, and that objective is around ensuring that the land that is currently under sustainable agriculture is being increased. And that is exactly what President Ron is referring to, and something that we are currently looking at as a department to ensure that we also promote sustainable agriculture in South Africa. We have got quite a few policies that we are addressing on sustainable agriculture. One of those is ensuring that we have got adequate seeds that would deal with this. But as you know, part of the seed industry is that it's an industry that needs to be looked at from a commercial point of view. And therefore, in terms of the areas that we have on legislation, for instance, the Plant Breeders' Rights Act and also the Plant Improvement Act, we are always as a department open to registering new varieties, new cultivars that would come from farmers that would deal with the issues around organic seeds as farmers would have. Both acts, or in fact, let me say the Plant Improvement Act also promotes the use of farm-safe seeds, which is also part of the organic regime that we are looking at. Yes, we will also look at the issues that he raises, because more than 90% of the soya that is planted in South Africa is actually GM. And there is also almost a corresponding increase in terms of the maize cultivars that we are using. But that we will also look at how do we then promote the other seeds that would come into the market that are not a GM. We also have got, let me indicate that we have got a lot of open pollinated varieties in South Africa that are not GM related. The issue is that seed production is also an offset of demand, and where the demand in terms of those open pollinated varieties that are not GM are taken in, we will have seeds that are not GM in the sector. He also refers to a very good concept that he's having on how do we go and have a good negotiations with Bomo China when we at home would not have a discussion with the other departments that are actually a public market. And in my intervention, I think at the beginning of the intervention, I indicated that Dr. Musasa had said that it's a good point, but I'm saying it being a good point when we're talking about market access would not sit well with the farmers, because it is us who have got to go and negotiate and get this market. Previously, there was a 30% set aside, and my point, Dr. McKenzie, would be 30% is not enough if we have got to push a transformation of those who have, and we will continue as a department to ensure that government markets are utilized by our farmers, including your good business, agribusiness. However, it's also very important that as we negotiate, the farmers also understand the consistency of supply, because in most instances where we have had successful negotiations, we will have only one supply and then the supply ends. and then the people are hungry again, and then we have got to go and renegotiate. So there's that element also that we need to ensure that as the negotiations proceed, we also ensure that there's consistency of supply from all those farmers who will be participating in the scheme. I think that would be the answers that I would provide to the questions that were asked by Ntate Mackenzie of FUSA. Thank you very much, Convener.
Thank you so much, Ntate Ramasodi. Thanks to all the presenters and thanks to all participants. It has been a very long day. We started 11:30 with the hope that we'll finish 1 o'clock. Now it's 2 o'clock. Very interactive session, very interesting. Colleagues who were supposed to take other presenters, but unfortunately due to time, they've submitted their apologies. We need to engage with our colleagues Mpho, Sekhala on having a follow-up session on this topic. Probably also on the other side, I've received comments that this type of a session has to be on weekends because most of the farmers now are on site in their farms and they cannot log in. And they said, no, why can't you do it on weekend? But we'll have a discussion with Mpho. And for now, before we close, we'll only take, for 5 minutes, we'll take in Ntate Motsepe Matlala to give remarks for 5 minutes. Ntate Motsepe Matlala to give remarks.
Comment.
We will give Ntate Motsepe Matlala an opportunity to comment for 5 minutes. Then we'll be closing at 2:15. Ntate Motsepe Matlala.
Mrenaka.
Welcome.
Ke a leboga monna, a ke tsebe gore le bolela ka eng. Ape be ke se gona monna.
You have been invited, Ntate Motsepe, to come and talk about the market access. And I'm sure this is your topic and you know the challenges that farmers are facing in terms of the access to the market. I really apologize for hijacking you, but you were one of the speakers that was scheduled to come and speak on the issue of market access. But if you're not ready now, we can engage.
No, a go thata ne re tla no enamela e tsamaya.
Ga e ke farelwa.
Banneng ga e farelwa.
Okay, over to you, Ntate Motsepe Matlala.
Well, Ntate Chair, first of all, let me say that the matter of market access we have talked about market access since 1995. And to date, in terms of what we see on the ground, we have not achieved much. I think what have been happening really in the South African agricultural sector, particularly on the smallholder sector, or indeed what we call community farmers throughout the country, is a shocking experience of not really making success, on what we thought would be much easier to make that success. Now, the second point that I just want to put on the table is we have, as I said earlier, that we have talked much, and yet we have not achieved anything, is that 62%, and you may correct me, of the population in South Africa depends on agricultural livelihoods. If I'm correct, then I would like to take you back to the budget considerations and research. We have not taken research very well, very seriously. And if you approach anything without researching it, how do you expect to access the market? Because it's not about access only. It is about producing and knowing exactly who you are going to sell to. Now, having said so, I would like to say that the Department of Agriculture, therefore, has not, in my view, and it is not a criticism, we have not been talking to a level in which we talk serious business. 70% or more has been on politics rather than on business, or rather than on market access for smallholder farmers. And I think that time is over for all of us to begin to work together to ensure on how we can shape up the market. And I use the research as a, a get-in kind of solution. Now, in terms of practicalities, I would like to make an example of a place called Vemba in Limpopo. Now, if you look at Limpopo in general terms, particularly the area that I'm talking about, or let me just generalize and say former Venda and former Kazangul, you will see that these two areas are fruit world. And every family has what we call bananas, you name it. And yet these people cannot take their market anywhere. The bananas are getting rotten in the yards there. If you can go there, you will understand what I'm talking about. Yet in that area, there are at least more than 1.2 million people. And if you combine with Kazangul, then you will understand what I'm talking about. And indeed also in Leboa, or the so-called Limpopo now. Now, clearly, we are not talking seriously on market access. And I think the direction that we have taken over the last 25 years was very incorrect, because we have never used research. We have never used evidence to make sure that we can understand exactly what we mean by market access. And this is unfortunate, because we talk without evidence. We talk without practicalities of what could happen or not happen. So really the direction that the department is taking is fruitless. And the expenditure that is put in there is fruitless expenditure. And I'm not criticizing the department. That brings me to another issue. The issue is whether, really, truly speaking, whether we really, as unions, whether we can really assist the department. Now, my approach, therefore, in the market access is that the department and the farmers, and I'm not going to say the unions, because there is a discussion in Africa, in Tanzania, which was identified by the African scientists on whether or not the unions, the farmer unions in Africa or elsewhere are making a serious contribution. Or whether they are really assisting the governments in Africa to take correct decisions. Whether they are driven by interest or politics. Or whether they are truly assisting the smallholder farmers to become business people in the field. Now, the scientists were then asked, because I was part of that meeting, to say, but then if you say so, what is it that we must do to make sure that a smallholder farmer in Africa, let alone in South Africa, would then access this market? And whose market do we want to access, because we are our own market? Now, the answer was because we have not researched properly, first of all, on who we are and who do we represent. We have not researched that. We have not researched, for example, what exactly is happening in Venda. We have not researched what exactly is happening in Nelspruit, in Zanin, in terms of fruits. What fruits do we have? Where are we going to sell these? And yet we are almost about 65% of the population in South Africa as Black people. Soweto is not receiving any agricultural produce, and we don't have a research on how we can sell to Soweto. The Soweto people go in town to go to fruit and veg to buy, yet we are here. Now, ourselves and Black Business Council, as an affiliate, have now started our own to say, but why don't we then use at least about 110 farmers on the valley of Pinans River from Radium next to Wombath. So we then get young graduates, young people, graduates, to say, but then why don't you go door to door in Alexandra? And they have done that for 9 months. And at the time when they started, they were only able to get about 70 clients. Now they have 485 clients, as we were talking 2 weeks ago. Now these people are now, these young people get the spinach from these Black farmers, they get the beetroots, they get, the vegetables, and they deliver to these families every weekend. Then we said, all right, let us get a research to go into this and see what is it that we can do so that we can then cut on going to the markets and this thing can grow. So out of that evidence, then we will come to the department and say, you have a budget. Let us create our own markets in the way that I am saying. But if you then say to us, the market access, now you are then going to come with politics, because you are going to say the white people are not giving us opening in the market access. And I don't think, therefore, with respect to your listeners, that we should take that route. I don't think the white farmers owe us anything, because we are many, many people more than the white grouping as well. And I will give you the example of AfriForum. Behind, right in front of our eyes, they started this grouping, and now today they are building a university in Centurion. Now today they are giving us hell everywhere, in legal cycles everywhere. And yet we are so many. Can you imagine if we want to access our own markets, we can use ARC with its own 400 employees, many of them that have PhDs. We can use those people to research to make sure that our markets are available to us. Now, FAO, which is here in South Africa, have then sent a professor, a committee to me, simply because I have a farm in Zimbabwe, to say, but what do we do with this market? How can Limpopo farmers and Gauteng or whatever sell us 1, 2, 3? That is access. Now, therefore, my definition of access is not related to the past, it's related to the future, and is related to the contribution that farmers themselves can make, a contribution to the Department of Agriculture, so that the Department of Agriculture, because this department is set to be a political department, which I disagree, because this is a food department that should be apolitical. I am interested in business. I'm not interested in politics, Mr. Chairperson. So therefore, my definition or my argument in conclusion, because I'm not going to give you a lot of things, is that we need to take the Agricultural Research Council to do something about what we are discussing today. We need to review their mandate. We need to ask whether the extension could not be under the Agricultural Research Council. The Research Council need to be partly independent to make its own money. It can't depend on government 100%. And once we have done that, the scientists like yourself, Chairperson, with utmost respect, would then begin to rechannel that research to say that farmers that are involved in, for example, grain products, in vegetables could access this research and they could use it. And of course, the research would also be done on the black areas like in Soweto, Alexander, Mamelodi, Atteridgeville, and everywhere, including Venda, Limpopo, Leboa, Como, and everywhere, and in the Eastern Cape. That is what we are busy with, because this access has bedeviled us specifically since 1996. And Honorable Minister Togo Diziza can attest to that. Today we are still talking about it. And it is unfortunate that we are talking about what we have talked about those years. So the department's approach to market access, in my view, as a non-scientist, is wrong. And I would like to pause and stop here, because I believe in practicalities. I believe in something that we do. I'm a farmer, and I have no time for politics. I have time to talk business with you. And if you in your market access cannot talk business, cannot really make sure that I am going to be happy with what I would produce and with what I will sell, I better not be part, because my problem is business, is making business. You see now, I want to make a final example, I'm sorry. In Limpopo, the Vivo and Baltimore area, we have gone to Mozambique and we've spoken to the government of Mozambique as NAFO South Africa, because we have 11 years without collaborating with government because of certain people that told us that NAFO is dead. And that was unfortunate. The whole thing was like, the whole system of government in South Africa was against us. And it's not a complaint, it's a reality. I'm saying now, NAFO went to Mozambique to speak on behalf of the vegetable producers in Limpopo. Now, 200 trucks per month go to Limpopo to get the produce. Before they come, and I can take you there, and you can see they are commercial farmers. Before they get into Malelane, they pay into the bank. And we know already that they are going to get so many tons. 200, and I'm not overreaching. I am telling you practicalities. I'm telling you business. I'm not talking business, politics. Now, these people who are producing in this way, Chairperson, with respect, are not able to supply our prisons, are not able to preserve, to sell their products to the schools, because the white farmers are actually using, despite the law, Black economic empowerment, despite many rules that govern our agricultural sector, we don't have any opportunities on that. In Limpopo, we have evidence, and I can send you documents. So market access must be redesigned, it must be reviewed, because the way we are following it has taken us more than 20 years without making an impact. Our Honorable Minister of Agriculture, when she goes to Parliament, she's not even going to mention, as if we continue this way, to say that black farmers or smallholder farmers are producing how much. It's not going to mention that, because that information is not there. But if we change, Mr. Chairman, and hear me, that we can only talk about business, and we can really begin to ask ourselves whether the union or the farmer union make any contribution. All what I see is politics and all those kind of things. And I'm totally against. I've been in the business for some time, and I understand what I'm talking about. You can't talk about market access if the status quo is not going to change. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mokona Nchidikgolo, Mina Tantlagane. Mokona Mabule. Mokona Mabule. Ngwana kanyane ya nate, Kgoshi Rakgadi wa bobedi. Ra leboga Mkone. Thank you for your submission. We need to review, re-strategize our discussions around market access.
Yes.
We need to remove politics out of it and talk business.
Absolutely.
If we are in the majority and we still cry and say they are not giving us access, who are we crying to? Because we are our own market. That's what Date Motsepe Matlala has been saying in summary.
Yeah.
And Date Matlala, we definitely have to have another session that will talk about reviewing and revitalizing access to market. And I'm sure at that time, you will log in early and lead the discussion.
Absolutely, because I wasn't even prepared. I was just talking out of my own head. And I apologize for this, Comrade Chairperson. And if I'm not insulting you by calling you comrade, but that is who I am and that is where I grew up into, you know. But the issue is I will be well prepared next time.
Okay, thank you so much. There is a commitment that we are going to have another session that will look at this reconfiguring, reviewing, revitalizing access to market.
Thank you very much.
We will announce the date on our Facebook page. We will work also with our colleagues at department to look at that. We'll announce, and probably for that, we'll have more participants so that we can remove politics out of it and say we've got economic power in numbers. We've got numbers ourselves. We've got numbers and we can use our numbers to assist us instead of always crying and say someone somewhere is not giving market access. That's the submission from Tate Motsepe. Without a waste of time, let me thank all of you for participating. It has been a very long day. We've taken over 3 hours in this session. Very long day, but greatly informative. And I'm sure you don't regret spending over 3 hours in this session. We have requested colleagues that if you want to network, please leave your contacts in the chat box, what you are selling, whatever. People might pick you up as a business partner because we are not talking politics, we are talking business. For now, we are going to close the session, the official session, but we'll leave it open for networking session. So the official session is closed. Those who want to remain and continue sharing contacts, you'll remain, and the co-host will close the webinar at around 2:30. Thank you so much for participation. Thank you so much, Ntate Mposakala, for organizing this. I need to present to the participant that behind the scene, you are the person who has been driving this. I am just the host. You have been running up and down to get the speakers, organizing, doing all the pamphlets. I really appreciate you, my brother. Thanks for such working relationship. I really appreciate, and I pass the sincere regards to your line managers at the department who have given you this responsibility to work with me. So thank you so much. Colleagues, again, level 1 does not mean that there's no longer COVID. Let's adhere to COVID regulations. Let's wear our mask. Let's keep social distancing. Let's wash our hands. Let's respect all the rules. Because level 1 does not mean that there's no longer COVID-19. With all these words, keep safe and have a lovely afternoon. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Chair. Are you still there?
Chairman. Mr. Rakolote, are you still there? Colleagues, will be closing the session at 2:30. We will just wait in case there's something that you would want to communicate.